Thank you.
There are
showing the screen.
22
Thank
other callers on the call.
you. She can start showing the screen. Thank you.
Okay. I hope that everybody can hear me now. I'll just start my slideshow. Okay. Okay. I hope you can see my presentation. My presentation fine. So I'm very happy that I've been given this opportunity to talk to you today. And just as a brief introduction, I'll let you know what I'm going to cover today. So I'll just briefly tell you about how I ended up here today and what I'm doing as a translator. Then we'll discuss starting in translation, what to do to actually get your feet off the ground, and then we'll discuss selling translation, and finally how to get the first client. Okay. So about me, as I was kindly introduced, I'm a Polish and English translator and interpreter. And I'm working mostly in IT, business and marketing, and I have quite a vast background in sales as well, and in marketing, because I've been doing that for a while before actually getting into translation. A nice thing about this webinar is that I just came back from my holidays yesterday after a long 3-week break, so I had a lot of time to think of how do we work as translators and what makes us what makes our profession different from others, and what can we do to get our to get our clients. And I also had quite a while to think of this webinar, or of what should we do to get the most important client. When I was thinking about that, I actually realized that I don't really remember my first client. I remember what I did in order to get my first client, but I have no recollection of who the client was, which is a bit surprising because we usually remember such life-changing events. So everything I'll be talking about today, it's all and only my own experience. That's what I managed to do in my career, and that's what I would like to share with you in this free webinar, because I believe that we can all make it. We can all get the first client, no matter how difficult the situation may look like, or how challenging our language combination may be. I got my first client about 5 years ago, and since then it's been working fine for me. And hopefully, in this webinar, I'll share some tips with you that will make you be able to get your clients as well. After I finish my presentation, please, if you have any questions or suggestions, just type them in the box and I'll be happy to answer. Let's talk about starting in translation. We all come from different pathways. We all end up as translators from different backgrounds, and in terms of finding our first clients, I would like to concentrate on 3 different ways into translation, and I'm sure that I will find representatives of all of these 3 pathways among you today. So we have recent graduates, meaning freshly made translators with their university degrees. We have career changers, people who've been doing something for 25 years and suddenly realize that they would like to try themselves in translation. And we also have a group of part-timers, meaning people who have jobs but think that translation may be a good either additional source of income, or they just would like to do it because they simply enjoy it. All of these three pathways have different benefits but also pose different challenges, and understanding where each and every one of you is coming from, what are your strengths and what are your challenges, is crucial to finding the way of getting your first client. That's why I'll spend a while now on discussing the benefits and the drawbacks of three different pathways and how we can turn them into opportunities, and how can we work on these drawbacks and challenges. Okay, so let's talk about the recent graduate first. What are the benefits of a recent graduate? So first and foremost, recent graduates have a lot of time and energy, and how is that useful when you're starting in translation? Well, you definitely have enough time and energy to commit, to really commit yourself to looking for the first client, and you are motivated enough to spend this time and this energy on it, as opposed to, for example, people who are too busy with their other jobs. So with time and energy, you can easily turn that into commitment, into looking for clients. Then the recent graduates obviously have the qualifications that are needed, and you'd be really surprised if you had a look, or if you got to know a range of translators, that many of them don't really have that many qualifications. Some of them just start translating because they know 2 or 3 languages and it still works for them. But obviously, if you would like to commit and do it professionally, then qualifications are needed. You can easily turn your qualifications to benefits, because obviously having 10 CVs on my desk, I would definitely go for someone who has the qualifications required. Well, then the element of the fresh knowledge, meaning that when you finish your degree, you have it it's just all fresh. All the strategies, the theories, the procedures, it's all very new, still very interesting. So in a way, it can also be inspiring for you. And you can very easily change it to opportunity to your business. For example, you can show off your knowledge. You can you can inspire your clients by the knowledge you already possess. And also, thing that you can't forget about, unique contacts. It's really important to stay in touch with people you know at university, your colleagues, even from different language combinations, your tutors, and it certainly worked for me when I did my degree, because I'm still in touch with some of my tutors who are always happy to either recommend me to someone because they can vouch for my skills, or they can sometimes they just forward job offers to a former student. And also I'm staying in touch with a lot of my colleagues, and for example, when one of us can take an interpreting assignment, we would definitely recommend one another. But obviously, being a recent graduate has also some quite serious drawbacks, and I think that this situation is quite challenging and interesting. So let's start with the most challenging part of being a recent graduate in terms of finding clients is the fact of no experience, and I know that a lot of us have to deal with that problem, because we well, when we graduate from university, we simply have no paid experience before, and it's a sort of a vicious circle because um, we can't get jobs if we hadn't had previous jobs. So it's a bit difficult to deal with that. But it is doable, and a lot of people break into with no previous experience. So it's very important to think of how you could get some experience. And as I usually recommend, it's very important to, for example, to do unpaid work for charities, which are always very open to any help, and they will be very grateful for your support, and also very happy to write a reference letter for you. The thing I did when I was starting, I also contacted all of my acquaintances or friends, and I simply told them that I'm starting in translation, and if they have any translation jobs, I would be happy to do them for them at a well, obviously charged, not unpaid, but they were still very happy because they knew me and they wanted to help me, and they were very enthusiastic about my career. I got a couple of assignments from my acquaintances who had their own companies, and they also wrote some reference letters for me. So I would also recommend doing that when you have no previous experience. And also, in terms of previous experience, I always recommend trying to get in touch with direct clients, with small local companies that may, for example, want to have their website proofread at a small charge, but on the other hand they will be happy to exchange links or give you logos. So these are the three ways you can deal with this drawback of being a recent graduate. A lack of business knowledge is also something very important when you are a recent graduate, and I know some translation students who just finished their MAs and they simply have no idea how to start in business. From things like setting up your company in legal terms, for example in the UK, registering either as a company or as a self-employed, getting your taxes right, and setting up your business and just having it operating, things like issuing invoices or getting payments. It's really important to read about the business knowledge you actually need from the technical point of view to run your business. And I'm sure that wherever you come from, there are helpful governmental websites that explain that to you. And I would also recommend either getting professional advice from a well-established translator you know, or trying to find a mentor who would be able to talk you through it, to at least point you somewhere. What do you need to do to set up your own translation business? And obviously no client base when you are a recent graduate, which is obviously also a drawback, because when you start working for a couple of months, then you see that you have a certain number of clients and there is always something coming in your way. But if you have no client base, you have no long-term relationships established, it may be much more difficult for you to actually get regular jobs. But this is something that always happens when you start. So that's just something that has to be worked on. Well, I call it a career changer, and as I said, it's someone who did something else for some time in life and now suddenly, for example, because of loss of job, wants to try in translation. What are the benefits in this situation? First of all, previous contacts, and you can never forget about all the contacts you already have and all the people you already know, for example, from your previous jobs, from the university. It's a universal truth that your previous contacts simply bring you work. And I had a lot of my previous or ex-colleagues who turned to me because at some point they needed translations. So it's really important to remember about that and to make every contact aware what you're up to now. Another thing that works in benefit for career changes is the experience they already have. If someone worked for 20 years in marketing and now wants to be a translator, just imagine that whole wealth of experience in marketing they have, and how does that influence their professional standings as specialist marketing translators. They can obviously use all that to their benefit. And they obviously have large vocabulary bases. They know what they are doing, so it's much easier for them in that terms. And also, career changes are very often led by determination, because it does happen that they simply lose their jobs, so they are really motivated to start their careers, as opposed to, for example, part-timers who don't feel that pressure. And as I said, career changes, field-specific knowledge. If you work internal 20 years in IT, your experience is just in this field, in this domain, is just uncomparable with anything else. But obviously there are also some drawbacks for career changers. For example, as I mentioned, they have the responsibility to find something, and the pressure very often from the family that they have to support, and that works against them. But on the other hand, it leads to the necessary determination. Career changers very often start with no qualifications in translation, so they have to build their client base and get clients based on their experience rather than qualifications, and there's also additional pressure coming from that side because they have to get their qualifications as soon as they can. And the third drawback, moderate experience. Career changers usually just come to translation with no previous translation experience, but I know some translators who dealt with at least proofreading translations done for their companies, so that that limited experience can also be a drawback when there is not much to work on to start with. Part-timers, what are the benefits for part-timers who want to start in translation? Well, first of all, no pressure, or at least reduced pressure. Part-timers usually have the regular job, so translation is an additional thing for them. So they don't have to be stressed about paying their bills with translations they perform. Part-timers are also experienced with their part-time job or full-time job they have at the moment, so that works to their benefit as well, and they can very easily change it to opportunities. For example, with the clients or with the knowledge, or with the clients or with the company they already work for, they can use that experience, they can use these contacts. And part-timers are usually very passionate, and only recently, about a month ago, I met a translator who's a native English speaker who learned Polish, and I held a whole conversation with him in Polish, which was really amazing for me because it doesn't happen that often for a native English speaker to learn Polish. And he was so passionate about Polish and about translation. he had his normal regular London-based job, but he just needed that to get into translation to realize his passion, and that certainly works to his benefit because he was so motivated and so enthusiastic about it that I'm sure that he'll do fine. And also part-timers, they have the benefit of field-specific knowledge because of the jobs they have at the time. Drawbacks in terms of part-timers: lack of time, because they are obviously with their current jobs. Other commitments, and limited limited experience they have. So that's where we come from. That's what we have. These are the benefits and drawbacks that we have to face, or that we can use in our careers. And we have to understand, every and each one of you just have to look at these benefits and drawbacks and these three categories and just decide where do you come from, what can you use to your advantage, and what do you have to learn how to cope with. And only when you understand that your background that counts, you can start thinking of starting in translation. The very important thing we have to understand is, I deliberately used the headline "Selling Translation," which is quite controversial because we really don't want to think of translation as a product. And we don't really want to think that we are selling translation. But we still have to understand that it is a business, a professional service, that we are selling maybe not a product, but a moderately customized service. And before we even start doing translation for money, we have to understand that it is perceived as a service in the same way as going to a hairdresser, or as getting legal advice, or going to your accountant. So the first and foremost thing that matters is to understand that what you're going to do is not going to be fun, or it's not going to be just a casual thing. It is real business, and that you're going to sell to other professionals. And in terms of selling that service, you have to take three aspects of the process into account, because every sale starts with marketing. You have to market your services to get someone to sell your services to. Then you obviously have to translate, and then you have to deliver. And this process, this sale process, is very important to understand every stage of it, and to understand that getting your first client is related to all these three stages, because getting the first client is marketing your services to that client, then translating for that client, and finally the delivery to that client. So in terms of marketing, you have to get yourself recognized, you have to get to these clients, advertise your services, and we'll talk about that obviously in a while. In terms of translation, you actually physically have to translate the text, and then delivery, you have to send it. You also have to send an invoice. You have to communicate with the client and answer any queries that may arise from translation. So from a perspective of a newcomer to translation, and getting the first client is taking into account all these three stages. So a newcomer, you just have to look whether you have everything that is necessary at these three stages. We'll talk about marketing, as I said, but for example translating, whether you have the necessary equipment to actually do it, what sort of files can you do, Do you have software? Do you have all the dictionaries? And that's what we usually think of. But for example, as a newcomer, you don't always realize what you will need, for example, to get paid. Because a problem as simple as that, if your customer comes from the US, how can you accept the payment? If it's going to be a bank transfer, then you will need then you'll lose a lot of money on bank charge. How do you issue an invoice for getting the first client? Because you actually have your first client only when you get paid by this client. So it's the whole process from getting the client through translating until delivery. Now we'll move on to the gist of it, to discussing how to actually get that first client. And we'll cover 7 different aspects of it: thinking business, preparing documents, planning action, marketing, paying attention, and over-delivering, and finally enjoyment. And in my experience, I believe that these 7 steps are necessary to get the first client, but also to get the next client, the 3rd client, the 4th client, because I really like thinking that every one of my clients is my first client, because that makes me deliver and perform up to the highest standard. So I always try to do my best for every client as if he was the first client. And it actually works, because every client who is satisfied will bring you more and more clients, multiplying your client base. So let's start a thinking business, and I have a screenshot here of one of my colleagues' website, Rainy London Translations, and I usually use her example because I think that she's doing a great job in terms of thinking business in translation. Because most of us, when we come to translation, we just think that the only thing we want to do is to sit in our room, in our pajamas, having a sip of our favorite tea and translate. But unfortunately, these days are over, and translation doesn't work like that anymore. Because, for example, of the economic crisis, we all have to walk the extra mile now. So thinking business is the first step to get your first client. Thinking business means that you have to realize that you are a part of the huge international business. You are a small part of a whole chain that runs around the world. Someone somewhere produced a piece of equipment, let's say a phone. It was the design, the idea, it was produced, the first model, the prototype was produced, it was tested, then they decided to produce it in a factory. It finally made it to shops, for example, in the US. They sold millions of it, they were really successful, and now they want to sell it in Poland. And they turn to me, and I am a part of a huge business that covers the whole world, and it is expected of me to act as like a business-minded person. So what does that mean to me? Well, first of all, if I am a part of business, I have to learn how other business people work, what is expected of me, how do I talk to them, how do I impress them with my profile, how do I market my services to them. And obviously it's different for different domains. In marketing, you have to be creative. In finance, you have to be strict and professional. And we obviously need our time and with the experience we'll get to it. We'll get to know how to recognize these nuances. And Rainy London, I really like what she's doing in terms of business, because she recognizes her position as a business person. She's always very professional, always carrying her business cards. Just look at her website. It's very professional, very modern, and that's the kind of translator I have in mind whenever I say think business, because it's necessary for us to recognize that we are a part of the whole huge business world. And it's also really important to realize that we are both sellers and buyers, that we also buy our services from other freelancers, for example from our accountants or from our IT technicians. We belong to the chain of services, and the easiest way, if you want to start in translation, is to get in your client's feet. Think that you yourself need a text to be translated. Think that you are, for example, a manager of a medium-sized company specializing in IT, and you need a certain document translated. Think what you would do if you needed that translation. Where would you go to? Would you look for a translator online? Would you turn to a local organization? Just think of this process. Write down step by step what you would do as a manager, as a business person, if you were told to get a document translated. Then think of how would you evaluate which translator should be entrusted with that assignment. What would you take into account? Would you look at the website? Would you look at the credentials? What would matter to you as a translation buyer? And what would convince you to pick this translator, not another one? So that will help you look at your own business from an outsider's perspective, and having a list of things you would pay attention to as a translation buyer will be extremely helpful for you to organize your own business, because obviously you'll know what others pay attention to when they look for translators. The second step of getting the first client after you recognize your own business self is preparing the documents. And what I mean by that is that you really have to be ready to handle whoever comes your way professionally. For example, let's say you advertise on Prose, you have your Prose profile, and someone writes to you asking you for your rates chart, for your CV, for your portfolio, and for 2 recommendations. And you suddenly realize that, yes, okay, you have your CV, but you don't actually have a rates chart. And the only thing you can do in a situation like that is to prepare one in rush. And well, obviously, it's not a good solution. So yet again, you have to think and prepare for any possible future requests. So you have to think of everything that may actually be needed, and it's really helpful if you go through translation offers, for example on Prose, looking for what others are asking, for what people are asking of potential translators. But preparing your basic documents is just necessary. You can't get into translation without having the basics done. And my basics are my CV with a small snapshot, which is a bit customized to reflect, to match my website and my my design. And I would heartily recommend having more than one version of your CV. And in my other presentation, in my other document on CV writing, I also mentioned that CV is not it's not a birth certificate. It's not something that's engraved in stone. And for example, I have 3 different versions of my CV emphasizing different aspects of my experience. For example, I have a legal translation CV, IT and marketing translation CV, and finally my interpreting CV. And all of them have their certification that I have, just not information that he or she doesn't need. And I always have these 3 versions and update them roughly every 3 months to have them at hand when someone comes my way and wants legal translation from me. Another important thing to have, and quite useful, is your own portfolio. I have a document. I also have it printed, and it actually helped me once to get my job because I had a client in London who wanted to meet with their translators, and I took my printed portfolio, and they were really impressed with the fact that I had my own printed portfolio. They told me later, after I got that assignment, that I came across really professional because I didn't come with my CV only. I had my portfolio. That meant that I understood the gravity of the situation, and I understood that I had to convince them as a professional to entrust me with this translation. And I also wanted to share an online platform that I use for my portfolio, one of the places that I put my samples on. It's meant to be for designers, but I don't mind. I just have, for example, wrong button, couple of my projects published in here, so the source text, an image and a target text, and it can just be viewed online. The platform I use is a sort of a social, quasi-social network for designers. It's quite useful. I'm not saying that it's the most useful ones. I got one appreciation, which is a sort of a Facebook-like in here. So it's quite useful. I mean, in my opinion, the more diverse your CV and portfolios are, the more chances you have for someone to come across your work and what you're doing. References. It is extremely important, and I can't emphasize that enough, to collect references from everyone you do your translations for. I know translators who've been doing this for over 5 years, and in that time they haven't collected even a single reference. And for me, if I deliver translation, I always automatically ask for a reference. It can be 1 sentence, 2 sentences. Some clients would produce a beautiful page with telling everyone how the translation was handled professionally and delivered timely. It's just in my opinion, getting references is really important, and it's the most important thing that you can use to convince someone that they should use your services. How can you get references when you haven't had your first client? As I mentioned before, try working for charities that will be really happy to recommend you. Try talking to your colleagues who may need translations, and they also, since they're colleagues or acquaintances, they will be happy to write references for you. So never forget how important it is to get references. And just a small screenshot of references I have on my LinkedIn, because I try to collect references everywhere I can. because I think that when the job is done and delivered, there is not much left after it, and the only reminder, apart from being paid obviously, but the only reminder that is there for me, the only feedback I will ever get is the reference, the recommendation. So it's really important for me to know what others think about my job, about how I delivered. That's why I keep collecting them everywhere I can. That's something that stays immortal, something that stays longer after you finished your work. You can also think of having a brochure, and I had a brochure for some time. I'm getting it redesigned now, so it's no longer online. It is very helpful with direct clients because agencies don't always appreciate that. Another document that you need to have, business cards, and a small snapshot of my business cards, my Facebook business cards that I'm currently using. The business cards are just essential because, and I always carry them with me, and I had them on my 3-week-long holidays, and I gave a couple of them out because I met people who were, even though they were also on holidays, they were interested in staying in touch. So it's always useful to have a couple of them also when you go to various events. In terms of preparing documents, it's also your online presence, and just briefly I'd like to show you, maybe you're familiar with my Facebook fan page, which brought me some clients. It's not as effective as LinkedIn, but I got a couple of translation requests. So it's really important to have that professionally set up. If you are using Facebook, then you need to make sure that your page is professionally set up. Then another thing, LinkedIn. And in my experience, LinkedIn is extremely efficient in terms of getting new clients. It's extremely effective in terms of getting new clients because I get a number of jobs and a number of clients, and even some agencies contacted me through LinkedIn. So it's really important to be visible and to use it. You are more than welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, to drop me a line. Just mention in the invitation you sent to me that you met me during this webinar, so that I can know where do we know each other from. So I'm very happy to connect with you so that you can go through and see how my profile is organized. For example, my portfolio is displayed in here and all my files. So it's quite useful. LinkedIn is quite useful in terms of getting clients. And also Twitter. As you may know, I'm quite active on Twitter as well, and it also brought me a number of clients, but it is really important to have it professional. Okay. Previous experience. The same as with references, it's really important to have your previous experience outlined. If you have any documents, for example, reference letters from previous jobs, or you can ask someone to write one if you are responsible for something even remotely related to translation, or responsible for something that is related to your field, like with legal or marketing aspects. So it's really important to gather your previous experience, to have it outlined on a CV or on your website. Oops. Sorry. Okay. The third point is to plan action, and I can never underline that enough. If you decide that you are ready, that you have all the documents gathered and prepared, and that you have your business thinking on, you have to prepare a plan of action, and you have to understand how direct clients differ from agencies. And for example, here's one of my direct clients. I'll just make it a bit bigger. One of the direct clients I completed the work for, so you can just read the description of the job, which is very specific, giving out the deadline, describing the job. You can see that urgent responses are needed, and I'm sure that I got this job mostly because I replied to it very urgently. You can negotiate with direct clients, but you can see how specific and how succinct the description is, and that the client knows what are their expectations and what are their needs. And that's largely different from working for agencies or looking for the first client who is an agency, not a direct client. For example, that's one of the agencies on the market. You can see freelance translators apply here, and you are faced with a really usually long registration form, and there is a lot of paperwork to fill, and you'll usually be asked for scans of your documents. So you have to take that into account to have every documents ready to go through, just to have enough time and energy to go through all the applications and registration forms. But as I said, it is really important to have a plan of action. So what I did when I was starting and looking for my first client, I just had 2 pieces of paper. One of them was for direct clients, the other one was for agencies. And I had a monthly plan that said that I will contact a certain number of direct clients and a certain number of agencies every month. Just to make sure, just to have something to check my results against. And so having that sort of plan, and then for each week I had a number of, I did some research, and I had, for example, 20 direct clients to contact to, let's say, IT companies in Poland that had their websites translated into very bad English. So I had a list of these clients, and I would contact 5 of them every week, 1 a day, just taking it really easy, sending emails, sending my brochure, telling them what I'm doing, what is it all about, inviting them to get in touch. And because I had this plan, I was able to measure my effectiveness. I was able to, for example, check what works better, whether a normal CV or a visual CV held online, and that's how I started with it. The fourth very important thing is marketing services. In a nutshell, where to look for clients. And to expand on this aspect a bit more, your clients are everywhere around you, because business people, individuals, CEOs, marketing people, they may always need translation. So the best way to think of where to find your client is to think that you yourself need translation. For example, think that you need to have your birth certificate translated, and look for someone who would be able to do it. And always have that in mind. That's how your customers are going to look for you. So think of where your customers really are. For example, on LinkedIn, and I always use that example when talking about the effectiveness of LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, you can join a number of groups. And what most translators do, they join groups of other translators. As you can, for example, you can see in my groups, there's a number of translation-related groups. So then a lot of my colleagues join these groups, and then they are surprised that they are not getting any contact from clients or any new potential jobs. Well, and I always tell them that it is obvious that they are not getting any clients if they are joining translation groups, because the only people they are going to meet there are their fellow translators. So it is important to think where your clients actually are. If you're doing marketing translation, go on LinkedIn, go and do group research on marketing groups, not on translation groups, and then join some marketing groups, join the discussion, start talking to people, and you'll see that you'll start getting inquiries. For example, when I joined Polish-British Chamber of Commerce or yet another Poland-related forums, I got a couple of requests straight away just after I told everyone that I'm a translator specializing in marketing. I just got a bunch of private messages because someone needed either a translator or interpreter. So it's really useful to think where your potential clients are. That's about LinkedIn. But where are your clients in the real life? For example, well, I have the benefit of living in London. So if anytime there is a business fair, a marketing fair, let's say entrepreneurship show, I would go everywhere with a bunch of my business cards and give them out to everyone. And that really works. I get replies from people I met during these shows. So it is important to understand that you have to market your services at appropriate people. And the way I usually describe marketing translation services is that imagine that you are a translator and you wouldn't obviously just stand in the middle of the street and giving out your business cards to everyone or your leaflets to everyone, because not every single person may be even interested in your language pair, and that will be a waste of time and money. So basically you should avoid doing something like that, because it's not going to lead to getting any client. So what you really need to consider is where you can find your clients. The fifth step of getting your first replying promptly, and that's out of my own experience. I know that's very often a prompt reply is the thing that really gets you the job, because if someone needs a translation urgently, they will pretty much accept the first person that sends a CV and is a professional translator. And I had it and in these situations it's the first come first served basis, and that is also a way of paying attention, answering all questions that the client has, and answering them always honestly. If you're going to be late and miss the deadline, you have to let the client know as soon as you can. And then you also should ask questions. It's very appreciated by the clients. For example, when you ask them what file format they expect to have delivered. And I actually got some positive feedback regarding that, because I asked my client what was the file format that they expected, because it was not specified. And I told them that I'm very happy to prepare it, to typeset the document, to put the pictures and text together if they would like me to, because I have the necessary software, but I'll have to charge them additionally. And they were very happy to pay me more money just to do it. So it also, asking questions and paying attention works for us as well. And then over-delivering. When you get your first inquiry, when you are already after getting the first question, the first inquiry from your client, you exchange the emails, you are all ready to go. happy. Taken apart, proofread to them, reply to emails, write. You can also drop them another email in a couple of days if everything went okay, and for example yet another email in a month, whether they need any more translations. So that's a part of the whole process to make sure that you give more than just translation. And the seventh and the most important part of getting a and I always, my clients will they will find out whether I'm enjoying what I'm doing or whether I'm just doing it because it's my job. And I can tell, and I can tell that when I write an email and I simply enjoy the work that I'm doing. I'm getting positive project managers who may be grumpy or people just there on the other side. So it's very important to remember the people you're dealing with are people, are humans. So just put a smile on your face when you are just about to type an email. Put a smile on your face when you're about to send your CV or fill in an application form. Believe in yourself. Believe in your skills. And the rest will just follow. And with that positive aspect, I would like to end my presentation. If you have any questions, that's the right time to ask them. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on my website, on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. It would be really appreciated if you could mention where do we know each other from, so that I know what do we have in common. Thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you, Marta, for your very, very illuminating presentation. I'd suggest that you can ask your question in the chat box so we can see, and Marta can also see and answer so that everybody can hear. So everybody here see the question and answer. Okay. Let me remind you again, you can type in the chat box and we can all see your question, and Marta can also see and answer so we can hear back direct. Thank you. I see no questions, so you must have answered all questions that must have been raising.
Oh yeah. There is. I can see one question now coming up in a box.
Okay.
I'll just read it out loud. Do you think recent grads should charge lower? No, I think that recent grads are as competent as more experienced translators, and there is nothing to suggest why recent graduates should charge less than more experienced translators. Less meaning, well, obviously the more experienced you get, the higher your rates are, but it doesn't work the other way. So if you have calculated your per hour rate and you know how much you have to charge per word to make that per hour rate, there is nothing to suggest that you should charge lower. And and obviously you should charge more and more as the more experienced you get. Another question, if you can only work part-time, how do we best put it to the client? There is, let me handle that question correctly. There is nothing, your client doesn't have to know that you can only work part-time, because it's always up to you as a freelancer to accept or decline the jobs. I know that it may be easier with agencies because, for example, if you are too busy, you can just tell them that you can't take this project on. With direct clients, usually they are a bit more flexible in terms of deadlines, and if it is a rush job, for example, I work with my translation partner, and if I am too busy to accept a certain assignment, I will recommend my colleague, who is my partner, to that client, and I can vouch for her and recommend her, and the client is very happy to go to her. But obviously it's a matter of trust between you and the other person. But I don't think that mentioning that you can only do part-time is necessary, because you can either accept or decline jobs. And there is another question. Is it recommended to include our name in our web page, or is it better to present us as a translation company? In reply to that, I'll just show you my website, which says, I'll translate from English into Polish and the other way around. Please read my profile and download my CV and portfolio. Send me a message for a free quote. I never ever presented myself as a translation company, but that's just my preference, because I believe that direct contact is more effective in business issues. But as I also mentioned and as the other website I showed, Rainy London, she does present herself as a translation company, and that works for her as well. But I think that our scopes are different, because I don't want to move to a bigger company in the future, because it's only me and I'm very happy as a freelancer, while my colleague, she wants to build a bigger business. So I think it depends on the scope of your services. And there's another question, do you think that having a Gmail or Hotmail email address is too bad? I mean, not professional. I've been using my own Gmail address for 5 years now, and it never let me down. I never had any problems with it. However, I am moving to my proprietary domain email address, because the amount of email I get to my Gmail account, it's just too much to handle. So I need another account to have it separately only for my clients, because my Gmail business account is for clients, for contacts from presentations, webinars. So there's just too much information overload. That's why I need a separate one. Another question, as regards the portfolio, how long should it be and what kind of information it should contain? What about the layout? Can we download yours from your website to have it as a sample? I think that your portfolio should be long enough to present your experience. For example, the job I mentioned, the assignment I was applying for was related to marketing. So all of my samples in the portfolio, there weren't too many, I think about 6 or 7 samples. They were all related to marketing, and they all contained some pictures and graphic elements, because I know that that was something my client was looking for, because they needed someone creative with an eye for marketing. So just by having some pictures there, by having a nicely done layout, I know that's what impressed them. you can obviously you can download my my portfolio. You can have a look at my LinkedIn or at the platform I showed you. You can have it as a sample, or you can, if you have any suggestions, you can send them to me. Um, you're very welcome to do that. Are there any more questions? Okay, I'm happy because I'm getting some positive feedback. I'm very happy that you enjoyed my presentation. Please look me up, connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, on my website, and I'll be happy to take the conversation further if needed.
I think if there are no more questions, and she has given all the details, it's a great presentation, and I hope we all benefited here. Thanks, Marta, for your kind presence, very hard work, and sharing all this experience with us. I hope those who have attended who are aspirant or those who are fresh will get benefited, first of all, by this piece of event what we have here, and second of all, by making contact and conversation with her. We also request you that we have recently launched our library section in Smith University plus an FAQ, so you can visit those around 20 plus presentations plus books, ebooks. We're shortly bringing those videos that we're making, and we also request you to participate in our classes, courses. Many are free, as well as if you consider you can teach something meaningful, relevant from your living experience to freelancers now and freelancers in the wings, in the classrooms. Please do so. We have a suggest course button also, so you can suggest some course you would like to have for you or for a community. So with this hope, I thank all of you for being here, giving your time at this Saturday, and I hope you have a great weekend coming ahead. Thanks. Please accept my respect on behalf of my team. Thanks to all of you, and thanks once again, Marta, for being here, sharing your great knowledge and experience with all of us. Thank you.